Hey guys, so I wanted to provide a short video to help us to approach issues that are kind of controversial in our current time period, whether that be things like the Iran war, the place of Israel and the church, and how we're supposed to approach all that thing, and as Christians, and but like America's like not like an arm of the church, and does that need to follow Christian thing, like all that, right? So I'm not going to tell you what you should believe on each of those issues, right? I can tell you that another time, and you should follow me because I'm super smart and know everything, right? No, I don't, but you get the idea, right? We need to understand how to approach these issues, okay? So often we have our opinions and we think our opinions are right, but we don't stop and wonder, why did we come to those conclusions? So there's this phenomenon, it's called the third person effect. And the third person effect is the idea that we have come to our conclusions rationally, while other people have come to their conclusions based on outside influence. So it's the third person, it's that person over there. They've come to their conclusion just because they're sheep, they believe whatever. But I've come to my conclusions reasonably. That's when you really stop and say it that way, that doesn't really seem reasonable. We have to ask ourselves, why do we have the views that we hold? And is our epistemology, that is our approach to knowing truth, is our epistemology sound, or is it vulnerable to being gullible, to being manipulated? The way that we safeguard ourselves against being manipulated, there are three different things we can do. First thing, we need to prioritize truth over our tribe, okay? Now, it's natural for us as humans to kind of gather into tribes, people that we feel safe with, who agree with us on generally most things. We can feel more comfortable, we can kind of let our guard down more, that's true. But when we silo ourselves into our little bubbles and we assume they're right without any kind of critical thinking and assume others are wrong without critical thinking, we can easily make ourselves immune to the truth when it actually goes against what our tribe believes. So for example, when I listen to the news, I have a specific set of people I listen to at the news. And if I'm not careful, I could just kind of go on autopilot and assume those people are the ones that are right in pretty much everything. And if their opinion, I'm going to be generally easily convinced by their opinion and not really convinced by anybody else. Even if they provide a facts, I'm just going to brush it off as, oh, that's just propaganda. That's just not whatever. That's just them being them. That's just other tribe being other tribe. Yeah, like come on, like those guys, like you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. And so often we kind of ignore where the evidence is leading because it doesn't come from our tribe. We need to not do that. We need to work really hard to say, okay, regardless of the source, give me your reasons. And then I'm going to sit down, do the hard work, and say, are these reasons better than the reasons that my tribe has on this particular issue? And if so, I need to make the hard choice to follow the evidence. And that leads us into the second point. First, truth over tribe, but evidence over possibility. Okay? This is important here. When it comes to issues like what many people call conspiracy theories, so often the problem with conspiracy theories is not that conspiracies don't happen. Conspiracies do happen, for sure. And so just because a theory is a conspiracy theory doesn't mean it is a wrong thing. But generally, when you have kind of outlandish conspiracy theories, things like the Earth is flat, this idea, what people are doing is they approach these issues not by asking what is the best explanation for all the data and the facts that we have. Rather, they say, is this alternative view possible, and do I like it? And that's not a good approach to things. So whether, for example, here's a good illustration. Suppose a friend of mine was murdered, and I was in town that day, and you had a video of me for 23 hours of the day, but 1 hour, there's no video. And that was the hour that my friend died. Now, let me ask you, is that evidence that I killed my friend? No. All it's saying is it is possible because you don't have video of that. But without any kind of evidence, that would not be good reason to convict me of killing my friend. And you see, we often approach things like this where we say, well, this other weird fringe view is not possible. It's possible, therefore I'm going to believe this. And it often leads us to believe some pretty dumb stuff. Instead of the criteria of is this possible and do I like it or does it seem like convincing to me, we need to ask, okay, let's look at all the evidence we have on the table. And what is the best conclusion we can come to with this evidence? And oftentimes the conclusion's kind of boring. And so it might not be the cool, I'm in the know and all y'all sheep are believing the government story. And it might just be the normal sheep narrative, or it might be something different. But we need to understand that evidence, not possibility, is what we should be pursuing here. We need to make sure that we're pursuing the best explanation rather than just what's possible and what we like. So first, truth over tribe, evidence over possibility. The third thing that we really, really need to work through is facts over feelings. Now, this is something that is often really hard for us. And I know that we would acknowledge this internally, or we'd acknowledge this like if we were asked, yes, facts come before our feelings here. But when we're approaching issues and we just have a short amount of time, our knee-jerk reaction, our feelings can really cloud our judgment. And we can respond not based on wisdom, but based on what we would hope to be true. So we saw this, for example, with a lot of people who really dislike our current president. They were the ones that were the most outraged and angry about Trump's recent post with the AI image of him as Jesus or doctor or whatever you want to say on that right here, right? They were the most outraged. And those who adored Trump were the most supportive. Notice they had this view before, whether they liked or disliked him, and this just reinforced whatever they already believed. And so we need to make sure that we don't do that. We need to be willing to accept truths that we don't like. We need to be willing to not have double standards in support of our views and in opposition to other views. We need to say, okay, is there a hard to accept truth here that I need to work through and just say, yeah, I need to accept this hard truth that doesn't support my view? Or does the truth happen to support your view? And are you willing to say, well, yes, I do like this, but the reason I'm believing it is not because I like it, but because I have good reasons for it. We need to follow the steps of one, what is all the data? Two, what's the best explanation for all this data? And then three, what conclusions should I come to? And then finally, after that, do I like this or do I not? Right? As opposed to, do I like this? If the answer is yes, here's a bunch of evidence that I'm going to use to support what I already like. And then should I believe it or not? We shouldn't approach it that. We need to approach it where we're seeking fact over our feelings. So, three approaches: truth over tribe, evidence over possibility, and fact over feeling. We approach these controversial issues with things like that, we're going to be a lot more sober-minded and we're going to think a lot clearer so we can come to better conclusions on all these controversial issues. I hope this helps. This isn't a perfect, infallible way of making sure that you're never wrong, but I do think this is a really helpful way that we can approach these issues with godly wisdom, like it says in Proverbs. Thanks, guys.